Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fourth and final week of the Teacup for One Banned Book Movie Marathon. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees. And today we are here to talk about one of the greatest dystopian novels slash one of the not greatest movies ever. Well, so the critics said. I liked it, but today is all about Handmaid's Tale. It is a very popular TV series, which is how many people know about it and how it's had a renaissance over the past 6 to 7-ish years, if not a little bit more than that. But many folks forget that before it was a very successful TV show, it was a very not successful movie made in 1990 starring Natasha Richardson of Parent Trap fame. It's based on the 1985 novel by Canadian treasure Margaret Atwood. We love her. Granted, I'm a hypocrite for saying that because I've never actually read any of her books, including this one. But I just like the idea of Margaret Atwood. You know, the idea of Margaret Atwood is great. I met Margaret Atwood once. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen the photo. If not, you should go look. I posted it today. It's a picture of me and Margaret Atwood, and it's wonderful. Speaking of wonderful, let's bring in our guest for tonight. Look, everyone, it's Jeanette.
Hello.
Hello, Jeanette. Welcome.
Hey, how's everything? Better than it is in Gilead.
My goodness gracious, yes. It's so appropriate, I think, that we have one Canadian and one American here to discuss this, because that is seemingly such a strong part of the subtext of the novel, not so much the movie, but this whole thing of there's America and then there's Canada. Canada's
much
doing
like I got vibes off of this movie similar to Civil War when we watched that either early this year or I think it was early last year. Jesus.
It's been that long. No, late last year. Last
year. Okay, good.
Yeah, definitely. It's Canadian money's probably doing really well in this universe.
Yeah, I think so. If money's still a thing outside of these, I assume so. I assume the rest of the world is functioning just fine.
It is. Yeah. Well, at least I don't think they really touch on it in the movie. At least in the book, I think they eliminated money, or in the book they eliminate paper money. And a big thing, a big step towards Gilead becoming Gilead, is them eliminating women being able to have money.
Yeah.
So the credit cards are frozen and taken away. Only the men can have money, and it's a whole thing. It's such a fascinating work that I think it stands outside of the movie. But even the movie, I think, is meritable. But anyway, opening question: what job would you want in Gilead?
I mean, what are my options? I'm a housewife, or a baby bearer, or a corpse dust sweeper.
No, there's more. So you've got your handmaids / concubines, which is you get the really cool red robe, and depending on if you're in this universe or the TV show, you get a cool white bonnet. You can be a rich wife who's probably infertile but gets to rock blue, because blue is the color of privilege in this universe,
and enslave other people. Yes.
That too. You could be an aunt. Being an aunt is apparently quite good in the Gilead hierarchy, because they're allowed, they can still have books. They can still read. So
they are the learned women.
Yeah, they get to train all the handmaidens. They're those ladies who are okay, why did we do this? Because we sinned. So you could be one of the teacher ladies, or you could be one of the Jezebels. And actually, I would pick Jezebel. Based on this movie, it seems like they've got...
it could be this, it could be D&D, it could be real life. I'm going to choose Jezebel.
Yeah, so, right?
Yeah.
They've got a great set. They still get lotion. They still get stuff. All they have to do is just work at night. They get to sleep in. It's a good life.
I mean, I dabbled in Jezebelness myself. It was pretty wonderful.
Hopefully not in Gilead terms.
No, it was willing. It was consensual. Not in that way. It wasn't that sort of thing. But, as far as the whole nightclub thing,
Yeah. I'm honestly, the nightclub culture in this movie, it seemed pretty good.
Yeah, I was waiting for Patrick Bateman to walk into that bathroom, though. It was pretty great.
Now, that's another band book. It's another band book. But anyway.
Yes.
Handmaid's Tale. Had you ever seen this movie or read this book? What was your familiarity going in? Or seen the show?
I have not watched the show. I have not read the book, and I didn't even know this movie existed. I do know the general gist of the book. I know the general gist of what the TV show has done. And to be honest, I was excited for this movie, and I felt rightfully so after I was done watching it. Yeah, once I saw the cast and kind of like the running time, like, okay, they didn't try to make a TV series that and then squish it into a movie. That's nice.
Yeah, I was so pleasantly surprised with this movie. I had seen parts of it before we had before streaming and before the internet gave us access to almost everything that we wanted. I was very big into just collecting, borderline hoarding VHS tapes, especially when they started to go on sale for like 50 cents each when DVDs.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so during one of my like collections, I got this movie on VHS for probably like 50 cents. I knew of
Wow.
it. Yeah. I started to watch it, and it was another classic case of, okay, I'm going to turn it off and I'll come back to it. And I just never did. I got as far as actually considering as far as I got into the movie, it probably made me uncomfortable. And that's why I turned it off. I made it to the first ceremony scene.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I think I was probably watching it like on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock and like 10 a.m. and thought, this is too much. This is too much.
See, wrong time to watch this.
I just woke up. I don't want. Yeah, anyway. But yeah, and I was convinced it was a made for TV movie, and seemingly it wasn't, just because it looks and feels like a made for TV movie.
It does. I was gonna say the whole movie overall feels like it was made in the 80s.
It
doesn't feel like a 90s, which to be fair, it's 1990, so it's not like we were that far in. So technically it was made in the 80s, I guess.
Right.
And so like, I don't know. Yes, it almost gave off like a dark fantasy vibe.
Yeah.
At points.
Yeah. But oh no, where'd you go?
No, it's okay. I'm right here.
Okay. But I guess, oh yeah, my main point. I was so pleasantly surprised with this movie because I built it up in my mind for all these years as it being not a good movie. Just because I remembered it felt low budget from what I recalled. Like the cover, which I used on the poster / thumbnail for this event, just gives very like soap opera-y vibes of her just like wrapped in her red Handmaid's thing. And yeah, I just assumed it wouldn't be that good. And also it didn't get good reviews, but like just even like the opening credits, seeing all the names rolling by, like even outside of the cast, Colleen Atwood did the costumes, and now she's like Colleen Atwood, who's making all those beautiful like period piece costumes for our favorite fantasy movies, like she did Into the Woods. She did not do Cinderella.
She has a real flair and flavor for I want to call it organza, but also like tulle and like sheer materials. She really incorporated sheer materials throughout everything,
including this. Such sheer.
Yeah. So I did notice that like in the nightclub scene specifically, where they take the details of the sheer veils and all the dancers' clothes have like some element that is made up of this like flowy. Yeah, like I don't know if that was intentional or just again a cost saving thing. Like this is the material we have access to. Let's just use it in a bunch of different colors. But yeah, I thought that the costumes were good for the time. If we're gonna dive into the fact that it looks like a made for TV movie, like it did feel low budget, which is fine. Like that's okay. I felt the thing that was lacking was if we're gonna talk about, it's not the costumes, maybe it's the cinematography, maybe, but I feel like that was more all a result of, I don't think the directing's very good.
Right. I think there were a lot of issues with him from what I've read up on. But at the same time, I almost feel like that in an unintentional way benefits the movie, because since it does feel so low budget and so sanitized, and it does feel like a made for TV movie, when the shocking things happen, for me, they hit in a much harder way.
Like they feel very real. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I wasn't expecting it to go as hard as it did. Like I wasn't expecting first off, the first time I ever saw this movie, I wasn't expecting the handmaid ceremony at all, but let alone to see it and to see, even though you don't see that much, but like the intensity on her face, like what's reading is so tough.
It's one of those things where the amount of time they spend on it is one of the things that makes it uncomfortable. Also, I will say that's where the cinematography was really good. I thought in that first scene of it, I didn't realize Faye Dunaway's character was there until like part of the way through the scene. Right. So I thought that was very well done.
Yeah. just that I think that whole sequence is very well done. Even just the concept of it from Margaret Atwood's perspective is so disturbing, and I think it's visualized and realized very effectively. And then and then also the scene when they have the other ceremony when the handmaids like rip the guy apart. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, man.
A very sanitized movie.
I felt
blood off. Oh God.
That scene I felt was very devil's advocate as far as like of modern viewpoint. Of like tearing a man apart just because somebody says he did something wrong. If we want to dive into cancel culture, but not calling it wrong across the board, the Me Too movement is extremely important. But like this idea that just because one person points a finger that we have to tear somebody down.
Well, I thought that we're getting so far ahead of ourselves, but there's so much.
Yes.
But no, I guess I'll bring it back in a second. But to that point, what I thought was like where my mind instantly went with that scene was at first like spoilers for the 7 of you watching, 2 of which are probably my cats who didn't watch this. Also, hi mother. She did not see the movie, but the series gave her nightmares. Rightly so. When that scene happened and like they hung the handmaid because she had the affair with the doctor. Oh no, one of us froze. Who could it be? I'm just gonna keep talking. So when we had that scene where they're talking about the handmaid having the affair with the doctor and then they hang her, spoilers. My first immediate thought was, oh, what about the doctor? Are you just going to let him go off scot-free? Then they bring the guy in. And then my thought was, oh, okay, some accountability. But then it's not even him. But then they're like, oh, he took advantage of a handmaid. I thought, okay, well, still accountability. Then it turns out that he was just part of the resistance and they were lying about who he was. So that's tricky. Anyway, still not sure who's frozen. Might be me. It might be Jeanette. Oh, Jeanette's gone. It was probably Jeanette. If anyone's watching and you could still see me, let me know in the comments. I'm still going to keep talking though. So here we go. So let's rewind it a bit and I'll just give you an overview about The Handmaid's Tale. For anyone who doesn't know, if you do know The Handmaid's Tale, let us know in the comments. Have you read the book? Have you seen this movie? Have you seen the TV series? Long story short, The Handmaid's Tale is basically a dystopian, futuristic novel. Some folks have said it's science fiction. Others, including Margaret Atwood, have said it's not science fiction, but it is speculative fiction, which I think makes a ton of sense because I think Margaret Atwood has said that to her mind, science fiction has to involve, I'm going to misquote her. I'm sorry, Margaret, if you're one of the 5 people watching. I feel like Margaret has said something to the effect of, if you're dealing with science fiction, it needs to be stories that deal with technology that like we don't have and we will never have. Whereas speculative fiction is all stuff that can happen within like the reality that we live in, but just like, what if this happened? And that is very much what The Handmaid's Tale is. So the idea is that it is in the not too distant future, basically the present, where because of radiation and other pollution related things and environmental things, the vast majority of people have become sterile. So like giving birth is not something that's easy for anyone to happen anymore. And so alongside a very oppressive government and dictatorship within the United States taking over, it's all very based in religion, and they are prioritizing procreation in such a way where any woman who is capable of giving birth pretty well becomes a handmaiden. And her job is she's like assigned to a rich, well-to-do family to conceive. So it's kind of like she's a surrogate, but like in the worst way possible. It's kind of how that goes. Yeah. Oh, Jeanette's back. Woo. Hold on. Just give her a second. There we go. You're back.
So sorry.
It's okay. Every time one of us freezes from my end, I don't know if it's me or you. So I was like, am I still live? Am I talking to nobody? I don't know.
My device wants to overheat today for some reason.
Well,
we are having a heat wave. Yeah.
Are you having it too? Is it down there too?
Yeah. Actually, I just got back from Florida and it was warmer here than it was in Florida most of the days I was there.
That's horrible. That's absolutely, yeah. We've had power outages because everyone in Toronto is using their air conditioners as they should. But anyway, I basically just gave a brief overview of Handmaid's Tale, but I'd like to invite you to give us your 30-second synopsis of what is Handmaid's Tale about.
Okay, cool. That's easy. Turn on the news. If you live in America, or if you don't, turn on the news and find news about America. Yeah, I don't, that's my explanation. It's the systemic retrieval of human rights by white men. It's them taking back the power they once held, and it is the consequences of such actions.
Yeah. I think, like, in a lot of ways, I do understand why people have said that this is not a good movie or it's not a good adaptation, because everything I've heard about the book really pushes home that, like, the book is so much better and so much more interesting because it gives you more world building.
Yeah, it feels like one of those books that would be true.
Yeah. And the main thing is that the book is all written from Offred's perspective. And so it's very inner monologue, which in general, it's hard to translate those types of books to film anyway.
Yep.
And they wanted to do narration, but then the director, I think it was the director, or no, I think Harold Pinter was into narration. Harold Pinter wrote the screenplay, and he's a very noteworthy, accomplished British playwright, which is why I was excited for it. And like, I still think his work was good, but he didn't. He tried to take his name off, and they said no. But anyway, they pushed for narration, and even Natasha Richardson was like, I want the narration, and someone said no. So we lost seemingly a lot of Offred's internal monologue, even though I still think this is a decent portrayal, like character piece of her, because I think Natasha is exceptional in pretty well anything she does, but I just think it's a really good fit for her in this film. But yeah, that's one of the big things, is that the movie doesn't delve as deeply into the world building, which is seemingly really fascinating from the book. And one of the things that I find fascinating about this book, and just it might be enough to make me read, which I've not done in a long time, is compared to the other dystopian-esque books that we've looked at previously, where they were very much like things that could happen but haven't happened yet.
Yeah.
The goal that Margaret set out for herself when she was writing this is that absolutely everything in this book is based on something that has been documented as happening in history, like politically.
Oh, yeah.
Everything. And so it was sort of written and conceived with this concept of how, especially at the, like, when it was written in 1985, there was less information for people. Like, there was like no internet, obviously. All the news that you were getting was filtered through either newspapers or television news. And so world events felt even more distant to people, I'm assuming, because I was around, than they do now. And so that mentality, which we still have, that mentality of like, it could never happen to me, like these types of things happen elsewhere. I think she's trying to invert that and say, okay, well, all of these things have happened elsewhere, either in a different country happening now, or in this country. Well, not this country. She's from Canada. In the States, like 150 plus years ago.
Yeah.
But what if it all happened to us now? What would that look like? And what would a dictatorship in the US look like? And she stuck to the idea that it wouldn't be an atheist society. It would be very heavily rooted in religion. And that's how we got Gilead.
Which is funny, because like, it's 1985, right, when she puts this out, and as a book, and it's interesting to me that she thought this. It's interesting to me that George Orwell thought this in 1984. Like, it is, because whenever I was growing up, I didn't feel this way about the future until 9/11. Because post 9/11 in America, the American flag became a Christian symbol. It was no longer for everybody. And that was how I felt as a person growing up here. And it was like, that's not for everybody anymore. That's a far right symbol. That's a Christian symbol. That's an evangelical. Like, that's not my flag anymore. That's a flag for somebody else. And it felt like it got taken away. And I've very much felt that in this movie. Like, that is who owns the country if we let, and it's interesting that it happened in 1985, and very easy to see. I would imagine the book dives deeper into how they dealt with LGBTQ people back when it was just LBG.
Right. Yeah, I think in the book has only one LGBTQ character. It's Moira. Which I don't. Does the movie delve into that? I feel like it doesn't. Do they acknowledge that?
No, but I figured the book would dive into it more because he does. Robert Duvall's character does mention like, oh, the women and the blacks and the homos, like that was what he said, and I was like, oh, that sounds like there's a storyline there that we're not getting so much.
Yeah.
And it really felt everything hit so close to home, and then to see them, like everything they're talking about, like there's house raids and there's stop at the border, the first scene, like stop at the
we
border.
were trying to come to Canada.
And that is it was frightening because I'm like, well, that's literally happening right now. Families are being torn apart at the border, and has been for a while, let's be fair. And then to go back to the point that it came out in 1985 and the whole thing with the homosexuality is like, what was going on then? It was Reagan completely ignoring the start of the AIDS crisis.
Yeah. Oh no, Jeanette, come back. You're making such a beautiful point. Jeanette. Oh no, now you're just left with the less insightful Canadian. Hello. All right, well, I want to hear the rest of what Jeanette had to say. I'm sure she'll come back. Oh, there she is. You're back.
My mother called me and ruined everything. Literally. What I was saying was, like, you were dealing with the beginning of the AIDS crisis and Reagan ignoring it, and I wonder if that played into it a little bit, or if that wasn't known enough. But it's almost like future telling. Like,
well, I'm sure it's known. If I had more time and did more research, I've heard things about how Margaret was seemingly very, I think, opposed, or if not opposed, vocal about what was happening in the US at the time that she was writing it. So I'm assuming that would have been a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the most interesting things from the book that didn't make it into the movie was they do seemingly talk about like the big inciting incident that leads to Gilead being created, which is there's a Christian extremist group called the Sons of Jacob, and they basically kill the president and then overthrow the government. But then the act of killing the president, I think they blame it on like Islamic extremists as a means of distracting the public so that they can swoop their people into Congress, basically. So it's kind of a distraction tactic. And then they start slowly but surely layering in more of a dictatorship slash theology based political system. Yeah. And I want to see that movie, which it's actually probably outlined in the TV show, but there's just so many interesting things that feel so uncomfortably recent.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, down to, we recently had Roe versus Wade overturned. Mm-hmm. They've literally, I mean, if you look up Project 2025 and if you just listen to what they're saying, I mean, they're saying it out loud. We want women to have more babies. They're just using those words. And it's terrifying. It was terrifying to watch it in this movie and go, oh, I'm pretty sure if I watched this in 1990, it was supposed to feel dystopian and far in the future and scary. And now I'm like, oh, crap, better watch out.
It's also like I saw on the news. I saw on BuzzFeed that a few days ago, some Republican influencer was giving a talk for like a girls' organization or a women's organization at a university. And they were asking about career advice. And then he said something about how, they need to the girls need to strongly consider bringing back the MRS degree. So he's like, you're here. Let's be honest. You're only in university to find husbands. And that's a good thing. It's like, no, why are you saying, why are we here? Why is this world?
And let's not forget the overarching theme in this movie and in this, I assume this book and this TV show, probably like this thing that has always been around and has not ever gone away. And Me Too is the first thing to even approach it, is what was she doing? What did she do to get, assaulted? What did she do? How was she dressed? How was she acting? Where was she? What time of day was it? Who was she surrounding herself with? What was she doing? Because it's never the assailant's fault, right? So I just, to touch on so many things by just having like kind of just one thing different in the world, right? Like, here's this one thing that changed, and all these things that are already bad got worse, and all these things that you were scared of actually happened. Mm-hmm. So yeah, however quality this movie was, it affected me. It was good.
Yeah, because I think, well, much like the other thing, like books that we've discussed, world building and the idea of the society is the strongest part, I feel, of the narrative. But I do also think Handmaid's Tale has a more interesting core story. Like, I think Offred is a far more engaging character, even just based on this movie, which is apparently not a good representation of the book. But I was still pretty engaged by her story. Like, even I don't think the book is in chronological order the same way that the movie is, but just seeing the chronology of her struggle, like her trying to cross the border with an entire family that's then torn apart, husband probably killed, daughter kidnapped and like assigned to a rich family, and then her forced into the position that she's in. And ultimately it's just her wanting her kid back, or at the very least her own agency.
I will say I found it, and I don't know if this was, I assume it was Margaret Atwood's goal, because she's a writer and not just a screenwriter, and like in novels usually there's just so much symbolism. I would venture to say the idea that the far right, or whoever we want to, evangelicals, conservatives, whatever you want to say, tend to say that the people on the other side are killing the family unit, right? Killing the conventional family,
right.
The traditional family. Mm-hmm. The fact that the first scene in this movie is that side killing a family unit, like breaking it apart and dismantling it. And the fact that there really isn't a family unit anymore. It seems that when children are born, I didn't see a single family with their children.
Yeah.
Like, what happens to these children when they're born? Like, does Faye Dunaway take care of it and it's a loved child? I didn't see any of that.
Right. I feel like they imply that just in the one scene when we see the picture of Offred's daughter, and she's like, don't worry, she's being loved. She's in a good home.
Yeah.
I think that's the closest we see to that.
But that's one of the like the immigrant children or whatever. But like, I'm interested, like with these babies that are born from the Handmaids, other than them bringing out that one baby at that party, I didn't see what happened to these babies afterward. Like, who are they? Do they ever get made into handmaids? Are they automatically wives? Like, who are they in society?
Oh, actually, hold on. I need to look something up. Okay,
real time.
Yeah. All right. So yes, this is again something that the movie doesn't delve into, but I heard about the book. The book does address what happens with the babies, and because of sort of what has happened biologically with humans in this book, not all the babies are born healthy. So babies basically, when they're born, are separated into two categories. One of them is called keepers or angels, and those are the healthy babies. So they have birthing ceremonies. They're treated as miracles. And then the other babies, which may be born with like genetic abnormalities or differences, are called shredders, and they just go away. The book doesn't tell us what happens to the
shredder. Thrown over the cliff, as in times of yore.
Yeah, or they're called unbabies, apparently.
Yes, because every life is important until it's not. Which is again how we're dealing with, like, again, we're forcing women to have babies now. But then once they're born, if your child has special needs, poo on you, all of that stuff's gonna be gone, or is already gone, depending on who you are. That funding's gone, that department is gone, the people who help you with that are gone. And they will probably tell you it was your fault that your baby was born that way, and that it's something to be sad about. So I mean, another thing that's just on point, and probably has been for a while, except now it's much more forward. We're taking away, help from people who need help. And the whole unavailability, that the fact that the only medical care that these women seem to get is prenatal care. They don't seem to get like a doctor for them. It's just a baby doctor.
Yeah, and that also just seems to be the only types of doctors that really exist, or at least that's all we see in this movie. I'm sure there's more.
It was a whole maternity ward, and that was it. It didn't seem like nobody was like, let's go check you out, other than when they needed to make sure she was young and fertile. So I also found it interesting that the majority, or all, and I guess they do point this out because they had separated out people of color. There were a couple of brunettes, but it was mostly white blonde people.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to go too far to point that out.
That's also in the book. They do make a point of they did that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think this is in this movie, even though it could just be a byproduct of when it was made, I do feel like it is reflective of what's in the book, which is like, this is very much Aryan white society by design. Yeah. Like there's talk about, I think in the book, they ship people out of the country, they deport them. And yeah, there's so much there. I think I want to rewind a little bit back. I thought, like, you made such a fascinating point about how this movie opens up with them breaking apart the family unit. And again, it's something that's not really addressed, I don't think, in the film. But part of the reason that they deem it like okay for off, we should probably call her by her real name. I think in the book it's Jane. Kate. In this it's Kate. Yes. So part of the reason that they justify it in the book is that her husband's name is Luke. Kate is Luke's second wife. And so because he's been divorced, the marriage doesn't count in this society.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's fascinating about Handmaid's Tale specifically is that it kind of exists in the transitional period that I've been saying in previous books I wish we got more of an examination of. Like in 1984, it's more or less almost at the point where all the generations are born within that society. Like the people who
society has collapsed as it was, and we are here. Nobody remembers, but there's young women in this that remember.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And these are people who I feel like all this political stuff happened when Kate was in her 20s, and now she's meant to be in her 30s. So like they're all very much aware. And one of the moments that was so impactful for me in like that opening sequence was when they decided that she was going to be a handmaid, and then they put her in that truck that said livestock, but then it was crossed out, and then he wrote the number. I just thought that is so, it's a little on the nose, but at the same time it's just such perfect world building because all this technology still exists. Like we still have the devices that serve one purpose that is now serving the same purpose of transporting living creatures, but now instead of animals, they're humans. And and it feels, again, a little too hit you over the head with it, but I think it's just so effective because it's so familiar and it makes you recognize, oh my gosh, this is now. And it's so unsettling to see.
I feel like there's one to that point there, like we're talking about, women like pieces of meat and things like that, livestock. I don't know I didn't look up the reviews. I figured it probably got bad reviews because I'd never heard of it. But back in that day, they used to like to say that there was too much gratuitous sex in films. And I feel like that might have gotten pointed at this, but that's the whole point, is that you're supposed to realize that at every turn she's being taken advantage of in the most base of ways, like not even in some metaphorical way. Like she's literally, somebody's trying to take advantage of her. And so I thought that, because I was like, oh gosh, they keep showing that. I'm like, well, that's kind of to the point, like that we see what she's going through. It's supposed to make you feel something. And to the credit of the film in 1990, I feel like this was going out on a limb and really pushing the envelope. And honestly, kudos to people like Robert Duvall and Faye Dunaway, who really had something to lose at this point in time. Like their careers were good, and doing something like this, it could have been considered tawdry. And I think they're lucky that it was only considered not good. And I really, not to stay on the acting too much before we get to it, but I thought that Robert Duvall did a great job, and that he and Natasha Richardson might have had more chemistry than Natasha Richardson and whatever young man was playing Nick.
Well, yeah, I also feel like I didn't care that Nick was just blah. I feel like that's sort of what he's meant. I think there's potential for an interesting character, but he's basically just a sperm donor in the context of this, at least in the context of this movie.
Even at the end, he kind of says it. He's like, "Go, our baby."
Exactly. I do think that probably in the book there's more to him, like being a member of the resistance, stuff that's more interesting. But for the purposes of this, like, he's pretty well just in some ways being treated, well, not being treated by any means the same as the handmaids, but from the wife's perspective, he's just a tool basically to get her the baby. And I found that so interesting that she didn't care if the baby was biologically hers.
No,
or
she just wants a baby.
Just get pregnant.
Yeah.
And I found her character so interesting because she wasn't what I expected her to be. I thought she'd be a lot more one-dimensional and brash than, I don't know, she kind of exists, even though one of the criticisms has been that this movie made that character less interesting than she is in the book, but I still think Faye Dunaway gave a solid performance. And
is it just one book or is it multiple books?
Not just one book. It's one long book.
Yeah, so that's see, I think when people say things like, because like I'm an Ian Rice fan, right? And there's all kinds of complainers about like, you left this out and you changed this and da da da. Boy, if you look at an Ian Rice book, especially the first two in whatever series you're talking about, like 1,000 pages. And like, what are you going to do with all that in a logically, especially in 1990 when movies were not 3 hours long unless you were Gone with the Wind? Like, you know, like an hour and 40 minutes is logical for people then. And so how do you condense that? You have to make some concessions.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I saw an interview with Margaret Atwood for CBC, actually, so keeping it Canadian, where she kind of touched on that. She was saying, well, the interviewer outright asked her about this movie, and she very diplomatically didn't answer, because I think she's gone on record to say that she's not a fan of this film. But it was sort of redirected to comparing it to how in the age we're in now, we're in a place where books with as much depth as Handmaid's Tale and other properties are able to be adequately adapted because we have the streaming model. And now people are just in a place where like the expectation is that like you can binge watch something, and people have the attention span now to watch something drawn out. And the only thing that was comparative to that back in the 90s or around the time that this film was made and the book came out were the BBC specials like the Pride and Prejudices, where
miniseries.
And she said that was because the BBC was funded in a way that like it was a different model that allowed and supported for that, which we didn't have in North America. So that's why we ended up with the movie that we got, which again, even though I think it's very heavily watered down, the core concept is there and it still evokes the thoughts.
Yeah, especially for the time. I just feel like I don't see too many other things from 1990 that aren't super shocking and super offensive that like really go there with these sorts of things. And yeah, I couldn't, I mean, you were getting a lot of, and these weren't specifically from 1990, but they were from the early 90s. You're getting a lot of like terms of endearment and Driving Miss Daisies and, you know, Fried Green Tomatoes. Like, those are perfectly fine films and they touch on important topics, but they do it in a real storybook manner. Like, Driving Miss Daisy is about a pretty heavy topic, but it's real saccharine in that movie. You know, Fried Green Tomatoes, about a real serious topic. Pretty, you know, like we get a couple of things here and there, but it's still kind of watered down compared to this. Like I felt like they really went there.
Yeah, I think the one big difference that I've clocked between the movie and the book, outside of things being watered down, the major change, spoilers for the one cat who's currently watching, she doesn't kill the commander in the book. In the book, she just escapes. And the book actually has an epilogue where it jumps like 1,000 years into the future, and it recontextualizes everything that you read previously, because again, everything is first person from her perspective.
Yeah,
they say that all of that is a transcript of cassette tapes of her recording audio from her experience, and it's presented as like a history professor or something like in the distant future saying, okay, well, we don't know how much of this is true, we don't know how much of it is false, we also can't judge any of the parties involved, so we just want to look at this objectively. And they're basically stripping away any moral accountability for the people who Gilead. And it kind of leaves you with that question of, wait, but why? But why? But yeah, the movie, it added that sort of, it felt like a Hollywood ending of, okay, well, she has to kill the oppressor and then she escapes.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you feel about knowing that that's not in the book, the Robert Duvall murder scene?
I mean, it's things like that where I feel like that then takes it into that category of the movie and the book are two different things. There's movies and books that are very similar and they try to keep somewhat similar, even if they change major things, but the ending, the beginning and ending, I think if you begin or end in a different place, then it turns into apples and oranges. And I feel like a Handmaid's Tale movie and a Handmaid's Tale book become two different things and it's almost not an adaptation. You know, it's like it is, but where do we draw the line for adaptation? If you're adapting something, I don't think you should be able to change the entire ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't think very, like, ultimately it doesn't change much because she does still escape and she does still, we are still left, I think, in both book and movie, not knowing what happens to her, just knowing that she's out of Gilead in some capacity. A baby's on the way, but she's going to raise it on her own. We don't know if she's going to find her daughter. We don't know what happened to the husband. I don't know. I don't mind the commander death scene just because it feels
well,
like it ties things up in a movie way.
It does, and I like what I thought she went when she did that, and the scene that we get right after it. I thought that really drove home a point of when she killed him, yes, and that was good for her, but it might have not been good for the cause overall because then they're reporting on his death, and to his side, it gives them power because they show that scene where he's like, "We'll fight," and blah blah blah. Right? Mm-hmm. Anytime somebody dies and can martyr for a cause, it's not good necessarily for your side. Right. So I felt like that made a point that maybe the book obviously doesn't make.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. Don't know what
I thought also that Robert Duvall in that last scene, well, in the scenes of him in combat, I don't know, like, if we were supposed to think that he was an older man and he was in combat, or like if I don't know. I don't know how young or old Robert Duvall's character was supposed to be. I assume he's supposed to be older, but he's out there in the war zone and he's talking like he's been out there for months. And it seems like he's just driving out there to film these scenes and then he's not doing
I feel anything. Like he is.
Yeah, I'm like, because I was like, are we supposed to think he's actually fighting? I don't believe that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. My mind didn't go there, but now it is. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about this movie.
If I could touch on the fact that I never once while watching this thought it was a bad, like I was never like, oh, this is a bad movie. Yeah. I literally at least 3 or 4 times though went, oh, that was really bad direction. There's one scene specifically where the first time she's leaving his office, he goes to kiss her and she pulls away, right? And then she leaves. And with the speed that she was leaving, I imagine she's already out of earshot. And then he just hangs out the door like it's a cheesy 80s movie or something and goes, you're a hard game to play or something like that. And it's like he's saying it to the air. I'm like, who? And I was like, I almost felt like the scene was written like she was supposed to pull away and stay there, and he was supposed to say that to her, and then she was supposed to leave.
Yeah.
And so it just felt really awkward. He's like smiling into nothingness and like going, "You're a hard game to play." I'm like, who are you talking to? I don't know what's it. So it was like little things like that with the directing. There was another thing with Nick in a different scene. I forget exactly what it was, but it was very similar. Where I was like, pretty sure y'all were supposed to say that like closer to each other and in a different speed than you did.
Yeah, I do think this is one of those cases where the director didn't get to cut the movie the way he wanted it to be cut, and people got in the way. So, yeah, I think that's what you saw. But anyway, Faye Dunaway, enjoyed her. Yeah, one thing that we haven't really touched on is just the fact that, yes, this is a historically challenged / banned book, which is always just an interesting conversation to like look at specific reasons as to why anything has been banned historically. For this one, I mean, the reasons do more so align with what I would have expected compared to other books where it's like they were banned for silly. Well, they're all silly reasons.
Well,
But
can I make a guess here?
yeah,
I'm gonna guess that one of the major reasons is the talk about the big A word. I'm gonna guess that that is because that was considered, which was a good way for them to keep people from talking about it or anything like that. That was considered taboo and wrong to talk about in any regard, whether you were for it, against it, whatever. You weren't supposed to talk about it at all. And I assume in movies, the rating system rates it, accordingly. So
yeah,
that would
that
be my
actually didn't
thought.
come up. That's actually not on the list. I think it might be
Really?
grouped. It might be grouped with people citing that it's like profane and that it's
Uh-huh.
sexually explicit. People have said that it's defamatory towards minorities, God, women, and the disabled. That's poor quality
See,
literature. The
those
reference to
people,
suicide.
that's the
Yeah.
thing that kills me is the people that read something in a book that talks about putting down a person and they take it literally, like they're technically on our side of things. Like they're fighting for people,
Mhm.
but they're so literal, just like the people on the biblical side of things.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it talks about hurting women, it talks about hurting minorities, we have to stop it. I'm like, yes, it's there to make people feel something so that they can be against it too.
Right.
Like, we need that. And again, I'm gonna every week, I'm gonna bring it back to American
It's
Psycho.
like, oh,
But the women's groups tried to get that shut down. They said it was misogynist because he kills a lot of women in it and he talks about how they're just nothing. And I'm like, yes, so that we can realize how ridiculous that is. Like, that's the whole point. And I just wish these people would calm down.
right. Well, actually, that was a big thing with Fahrenheit 451 last week that really surprised me is that within the universe of that book and that movie, I assumed that they would have justified book burning and book banning for like some of these reasons, like the sensationalization of, oh, it's profane, it's not good, but it's more so from the angle of this offends people. We can't have these things hurting people because
Yeah.
like it'll upset them. Therefore, the best solution, get rid of it, and then we can have a more unified society,
Yeah.
which I thought was fascinating.
Basically, like, and like I like to read books, like, like, again, like, I'm a woman, I like to read American Psycho, I get it. But my opinion is, if it offends you and you're one of those people that's being hurt in the book, like you're a minority, you're a woman, you whatever, like you're queer, and that person's being, and that scares you and offends you, you're not who that's for anyway. Like, you're not who that message needs to get to. And it's okay. You can be offended and you can not want to read that thing and you can put it down and never read it or never watch it. But don't take it away from the public, from someone who might pick it up and realize that either something they're feeling or never even thought about before in their life, and figure out the not necessarily the right way to feel, but the good way to feel, the kind way to feel. Like, if you take it away from them because it scares you and shocks you, is not going to do any good to humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. So then how do we feel about its place in school curriculums? Like, do you think it's an appropriate book to teach to students? And if so, like, what age would be considered too young? Like, would you have this
Yeah.
grade 8 library versus a grade 12 library?
So I haven't read the book and I can't speak to that. I personally think that there's very little you can describe in text that a child of the age of 12 or above can't read and understand if they are of the appropriate learning group. Like, right, they're not a slower learner or whatever, like they're not behind in some way. I understand that there's people of different maturity levels and all of that. In text, I think this book, if I'm guessing correctly about the sorts of things that are described, just judging by this movie and judging by things I know about the TV show, I would say grade 8 and above for the book.
Yeah.
Personally, for this movie, I feel like you could show this movie in a class 10th grade and above.
Yeah.
I think that you need to know that you're not going to lose control of your class when the sex scenes are happening. Maybe boobies. Maybe I understand we don't want nudity in classrooms. Maybe we cut the boobies out.
These are the same classes that are watching the Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet, like, which has just as much nudity.
Right. And so, like, I'm just like, yes, I understand there's a time and a place for all of it. in text, I think there's very little. Like I don't know. We were allowed to, again, I've said it on the show in this season, that we were allowed to bring in books. We weren't told which books to read. We could bring in a book and have it approved. And a couple of times I got questioned, and I would literally be like, show me a Shakespeare book that does not talk about what is happening right now.
Yeah.
Like, because just because they're talking about it in modern times, don't get on my butt about it. Like, that just happens to be what I want to read. And so I thought that really opened up my eyes a lot during those middle school years when we were allowed to do that, to like what is censored, what is not censored, what's questioned, what's not questioned. And I find it interesting that when it's enlightening, we're all very worried about how much sex is in something. But when it's not enlightening, it can be sold at the grocery store for $6. Because like it's the same thing, but there's a purpose behind it, and you might learn something. So like, then it becomes dangerous because we might learn something.
Right. And yeah, hypocrisy is such a strong part of this conversation. And to bring it back to Maggie Atwood, am I allowed to call her that? She's not watching. It doesn't matter. She has pointed out previously, like, if you're going to ban books, and I don't know if this was in relation to her book specifically or just book banning in general, she would always bring it back to the Bible, saying all the reasons you're citing for burning these books, or not burning. Well, I guess burning.
Right?
Yeah, it's all in the Bible.
Yeah. No, show
there.
me. And they show it in this movie. And that might be because she said that. I don't know what year she said that, but it might be because she said that, because in this movie, he's reading a sex scene out of the Bible. He's like, and he went into her and she conceived. And I'm like, well, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Yeah. I didn't even know that was in there.
Apparently the whole Handmaid ceremony is lifted from the Bible. Like, that's the first indication of that unwilling transaction. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and surrogacy. Like, that's how the Bible justifies surrogacy. I do know that. Bula or whatever, the handmaid. Yeah. Like, that is, it's okay for, and that's how a lot of polygamists get where they're going too. Like, that's a stepping stone on their path, is that whole story.
And like, now it makes me want to read the Bible.
You know what? I'll sit right here on this show and tell you right now. I mean, the Bible's a fucking crazy interesting book. Like that, it's so cool. Like, anything you want, it's in there.
Anything you want, you got it.
Yeah. I mean, there's you like the lottery. There's a few of those in there. There's a bunch of stonings in the Bible. You know, like you like this. You like A Handmaid's Tale. There's a lot of unwilling women in the Bible. Yes. It's like, I love that they kind of address that in I assume this book and this movie. I also didn't know this book was as new as 1985. I didn't look that up.
No, it feels old. Well, also
I thought it was like that one is much
thing. Older. Yeah, she was born in 1939. She's as old as the Wizard of Oz. But yeah, she wrote this when she was like 44 or 45. So
that's about the age you start figuring all this ish out.
Right?
You start looking at the world, especially in the 80s. Ugh.
No, but I guess it's also just fascinating to think of it from her perspective, with what she would have lived through, just having been born when the war was starting, the Second War.
Yep.
And that being her childhood and like her introduction basically to the world. And then coming out of that, and and yet here we are. Yeah. So little has changed, yet so much has changed. But
this made me interested in looking at what else she wrote. I haven't read this yet, and I probably will, honestly, because I'm very interested now. Yeah. And especially now that I know there's an epilogue that's 1,000 years in the future, I'm like, what?
Right?
Did Isaac Asimov write the sequel? Like, what?
Actually, she did write a sequel to this recently.
I was gonna say, I'm like, it's like a cliffhanger. What are you talking? Like, this end of this movie is a cliffhanger.
Right? Yeah, I'm fascinated by all of it. I don't think anything else she's written is like this. Mm-hmm. This is her first. I think you were off the air when I mentioned, like, technically people consider it science fiction, but she doesn't. She considers it like speculative fiction.
I consider this alternate history, even though it's technically future, but it's because of an alternate history, like Man in the High Castle. Like, I put that in that category.
Except, doesn't Man in the High Castle deal with like parallel universes or something?
I guess so. I've never officially read it, so I do intend to. But yeah, I mean, like, just to me, things that are like they take a historical event and either change the future from there or just show us that time in a different light.
Right.
I'd kind of lump them all together.
Fair. Yeah, and I think that is more so what this is in the vein of. She wrote I think it's called the Penelope Plaid. It's look at either the Iliad or the Odyssey from the perspective of the wives at home during the war, I believe. So like that's something I think it is all very, I don't want to say like feminist inspired because again, in what I read, she's very specific about labels and how she likes things to be labeled. But
yep.
Yeah.
I don't prefer the term feminist either. I think that feminist enters the idea that you think women are better than men. I like equalist because that's what I want. It's just equal.
Yeah, but I want to dive into it as well because I'm a Canadian. I should have done this by now. I think this is our first time discussing something that's so inherently Canadian as well on this show.
Well, y'all have the best viewpoint of America. Y'all really do.
Because we're right,
and that's why you have such great comedians, I think, because you're able to take the piss out of it a little bit and not be so upset about everything.
Much. I will say, like Canadian identity in general is a confusing thing. I have always found just because we're so like our culture, our pop culture is very inspired by and influenced by American pop culture in terms of the media, for example, that we consume, and in some very superficial ways our day-to-day lives look very similar culturally and socially, and then sort of identifying what is the difference is always a question mark, especially when you look at media, like
which is sad because we should be asking ourselves the same question, because I agree with everything you're saying. We should logically we should feel the same way. We should feel like questioning ourselves, are we American or Canadian? Like, but
exactly.
Unfortunately it doesn't work that way, does it?
Yeah, no, it's such a tough thing, at least for me. Maybe other Canadians are better at it, but it's such a difficult thing to identify exactly what is the Canadian experience, what is the Canadian identity, in terms of in an isolated context, just as like, this is us, this is our country. But then I feel like so much of it is defined by America and what is similar and what's different. And I think that this book, within the subtext at least, very much taps into that, into this idea of like, I feel like Handmaid's Tale is taking all the things that we witness and have witnessed historically about our neighbors and just amping it up.
Yeah. Well, predicting the future, which
especially now
she did, because it's been 40 years. And here we are. I mean, she did a great job. Good job, Margaret.
Good job, Margaret.
Thanks a lot. I mean, you predicted the future very accurately.
And I think the key there is that, like she said, everything that she wrote was intentionally things that have specifically happened. And even what I think is fascinating, when she's questioned on it, it's not like just a few bullet points. Like, all these things have happened more than once in so many different cultures and historically, that she, in that interview I watched with her, she was saying, a French publication recently asked me for examples of when this has happened. So I decided to just curate a list for them that was very focused on the French and on France. And I was able to. Like that for me was just the penny dropping of, oh, wow. Like, it's not just a few things. These are all acts and like acts of violence and politics and sexism that have happened across different cultures and different times. And she's made the point that if it's happened before, it is going to happen again. It's just
which is the thing that everybody on the other side of things will tell you to calm down, that everybody says that. And I'm like, and everybody said it the last time it happened too. Like, everybody, that's the thing that makes the most people tell me to calm down, is when I'm like, this has happened before. And if we allow it to happen again, it will. And it's a very like, oh, that's such an extremist viewpoint. And it's like, all right, sure. All right. And then here we are in a second term. So dealing with what we're dealing with. And yeah, it gets to that point where I'm like, I just hope every day that my daughter doesn't live in this world, that this world, like the Handmaid's Tale world, like, like I want her to live in the world that she's hoping to build. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think brings it back to something I said, I think it was 1984 week, about how like recent current events, especially like in our lifetime over the last 5 years, have just reminded me as to how fragile everything is. I think this book is another example of that, and why it resonates so strongly is, yeah, because it's not so far in the future that makes it unsettling. Like it connects the dots as to make it so recognizable that like you realize
I
like
loved
basically now
the set dressing with like not making anything look different. Yeah. House is a house, a toothbrush is a toothbrush. Like it's not some far set future. The only thing that's weird is the food tokens. Like that's literally the only thing that's different as far as like day-to-day life and like how things are run. Computers aren't everywhere. He's just got like a little walkie-talkie set up in his office. Like it wasn't like some crazy future.
Yeah, seeing very familiar looking settings, but populated by like those group scenes where they had like the hundreds of handmaidens in the red and then the like wives in the blue, just seeing very familiar spaces repurposed.
Yeah.
Was something that I found really unsettling. And again, that made me think back to 2020, how very familiar looking spaces suddenly became something different. Like fences were in place to like keep people in single file lines, like how people had to be 6 feet apart, which had a purpose that I'm not disputing, but that idea of how something so familiar and safe feeling can just be turned so quickly into something else. Yeah. It's a fragile society.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we stop this from happening? That's the question.
You go and vote and you protest and you don't see nothing or say nothing when you don't need to see nothing or say nothing about anybody else in your community, if you get what I mean. You don't know nothing when they ask you. And you watch out for your fellow man and give a crap about other people.
Yeah.
Like how much is that? Just give a crap about other people.
None of these
start with that one
happened if any characters gave a crap about other people in any of them.
Yeah, I mean that's where I'm at. I just wish that everybody, and this movie did another good job of also showing how nobody puts themselves in anybody else's shoes in this future society.
In what way?
Well, I mean, pretty blatantly in the fact that Robert Duvall's character is like, oh yeah, these things are illegal, but I can do them.
Oh, right.
And then she goes, and who are the women? And he goes, well, that one used to be this and that one used to be that, but they're just here now. And so it was like, no idea about these other people.
Actually, to that point, that's something that I guess kind of stood out to me that I didn't super reflect on, that I'm reflecting on now, is just this idea of the women in this society. Again, they're all a generation who grew up in like a normal 20th century, and then the turn happened. And there are the ones who are being oppressed, like the handmaids, who clearly don't have any agency because that's the society. But then you also have this whole chunk of women who are the wives and the aunts who are like supporting the system. Like, and that's just interesting to me that those types of people would exist without being indoctrinated into it.
Well, that does not shock me, because the person at the forefront of every anti-abortion argument, every women in the home argument, every no contraception, more children argument is always a woman. There is a thing about women, and I don't know what it is, where there will always be a group of women at the forefront of every fight against women that are fighting again, because they know that if they join that side, they will be the women that will be okay. They're like, I will be the one unaffected. If I make sure all of you are under me, I'll be okay. And that hierarchy can show itself down to like a group of mean girls in high school. If I'm on top, I'm good. You're not. Like, and it can be like this. It can be I mean, there's always, I mean, down to the fact that there was a whole, even not just women, but there was a whole group of Latinos that organized and voted for Trump. Like,
Right.
that baffles my mind when he's up there telling you, I'm going to mass deport.
Yeah.
So again, if I'm on their side and make sure you're all under me, I'm going to be okay because I'm the good one. And, for another cinematic example, maybe Samuel L. Jackson in Django Unchained, like, like, I'm just going to make sure that I'm good. And that's to me, like, the men in this movie are doing this because, that's how the world's been, and they whatever don't know no better, whatever. The women, in my opinion, are the real evil because they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Eek.
Yeah.
People are so messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, there's people really like this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well,
terrifying.
Anything else to say about Handmaid's Tale?
No, there's no Handmaid's Tale game. What? I'm shocked.
It's just us. I wonder
shocked.
what would the game have been if we had more people?
Oh my God. How do you even make a game out of this?
I don't know. I
don't know how you make a game out of something this grim.
Feel like maybe I just would have said, name the society where this horrible thing happened.
Yeah, right? Like, just name a horrible time in history. Where did this happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh.
And then you could finish with, 2024, 2025.
Oh, God. Yeah, I feel like it's oddly appropriate there were no games at all for this series.
Yeah, I did think that was pretty funny. I was like, these are the darkest times. Maybe.
Why aren't they? I mean, there were going to be games, but then we just ended up losing guests, and I was like, you can't have a 2-person game. Ironically, I could have had a game for last week, and I had the game planned for Fahrenheit 451. It was going to be charades because no reading, but then I didn't know we'd end up having 2 guests. We did. It was fine, but oh well. And actually, even one of them, Mark, he was like, why isn't there a game? I want to play a game. What's the game? It's like, I'm sorry, Mark, there's no game.
It's a very serious month. It's a very serious month.
Exactly.
It's a very serious one.
Next month, there'll be games.
Heck yeah, Superman games.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Next month is Superman for everyone watching because we need optimism now.
Yes. No, we need Superman after all this. So let me tell you this right now. I've never watched a Superman movie in my life.
Basically, me either. I have seen Man of Steel. I don't think that it does technically count, but like,
Yeah. And even before I found out this was going to be Superman month, I'm very excited about the new movie because James Gunn can do no wrong, in my opinion. So,
yeah, no, me too. And yeah, that's largely why I wanted to do it, because when something like this is happening, like a brand new Superman movie, I take it upon myself to just rewatch anything that is relevant to it. So I was going to watch all the Superman movies anyway. And I thought, you know what? Let's talk about them. I've not seen any of these. Let's figure out why people like them. Why does this character endure? And also, I think he's Canadian, which makes me happy.
It's going to get me to watch a Batfleck movie, which is terrifying.
No. There's no Batfleck in Man of Steel.
There's no Batfleck in Man of Steel. Thank God. Oh my gosh.
Now, Man of Steel is just the origin story for the Henry Cavill Superman, and then that character is applied to the Batfleck movies.
Oh, good. I'm saved from the Batfleck.
You're saved from the Batfleck, exactly. I think this is going to be kind of like Pirates, though, where the first movie will be phenomenal. Then it'll just get progressively worse.
I have questions about the word phenomenal, but we'll see when we get there.
We will. Well, no, Christopher Reeve, apparently that movie is really good. So they've told me.
Christopher Reeve, I believe in. I just never watched him.
Yeah, but I'm excited. It'll be a good time. We have some really fun guests as well lined up who either are brand new to the show or have only been here once, but they were a hit and now they're coming back. So it'll be a good time.
Yay!
Yeah, yay! Anyway, there we go. Closing thoughts on Handmaid's Tale and or banned books in general. I think we learned ban all the books. Reading is horrible.
Yeah, I read a lot. And I think reading's great. LeVar Burton would tell you reading is great. So you should do it. I think that banned books, I think you should look up banned books and you should read a lot of them. But just read. Like read stuff that interests you and don't necessarily have to read everything that everybody tells you to read.
Yeah.
And as far as A Handmaid's Tale, I'm glad I watched this. I'm very glad I watched this. This was great.
Me too. I think it speaks volumes that a critically panned movie of Handmaid's Tale was still really good. Like, I think it speaks to how good the material is. And again, I don't think the movie is a bad movie. I think it is a pretty decent standalone movie, but I do feel it's a fantastic gateway.
Yes.
Really
it made me want to read the book. So I probably will soon.
Me too. And there is seemingly an audiobook narrated by Elizabeth Moss of Offred TV fame.
Yeah, I'm not a big Elizabeth Moss fan.
But she's Offred. Yeah. She's of Fred.
She is of Fred. I thought it was funny that it was Offred, and I thought it was because she was wearing red, and it was like off red.
Of red. Oh, I like that.
I was like, what?
I mean, the whole naming convention, which I guess we didn't really talk about, but the whole naming convention I find so funny. But also, she ended up just like with a really good name. If you have to take a name within this convention, Offred flows, not like of Glen. I felt so bad for all the of Glens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I thought they were weird.
Yeah. Like, imagine your name is like, I'm trying to think, what's a really ugly male name? Like
an ugly male name, Mortimer?
Yeah, like of Mortimer. Imagine that.
Of Mort.
Of Mort. No, but Mort would want his whole name respected. He'd be like, no, you are of Mortimer.
Oh my God.
Is at the grocery store. She's like, I'm the new of Mortimer.
Yes.
Hello. Oh,
of Giles.
Of well, actually, maybe that would have been the name. I would have been like, I'm going to give you an exceptional woman's name from real life if she was defined by her husband. So it'd be like of George Clooney. Then you'd have to tell me George Clooney's wife's name. That's what the game would have been.
Oh God, I never remember that lady's name.
I know, but we should. She's phenomenal. I've used that word a few times, but seemingly she is. She's quite great. We love her. She's
what about of Kevin Bacon? I can get that one.
Oh, what? Kira
Sedgwick. Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
I don't know why that popped into my head.
Kira Sandwich.
Kira Sandwich.
Kira Sandwich. Of Dax. Who would that be?
Oh, Kristen Bell.
Yeah, Kristen Bell.
Yeah.
This is a fun game.
I love Dax Shepard so much.
I think they're a cute couple in general. Yeah. Of Ted Danson. Of Ted.
I don't know who Ted Danson's married to.
Mary Steenburg.
Is he really?
Future 3. Yes.
Stop. Oh, I love them.
Yeah, me too. Well, that was a fun game. And then, I guess closing question. What was your biggest surprise over the course of this month? Whether it was something in the material that resonated with you, whether it was an idea. Yeah.
It might be a little bit of, I guess maybe this is a negative thing, but what surprised me was I was not into 1984. I thought I was going to be super duper gung ho about it. And that was a little boring. So I was like hoping it would get me back into the book, but I don't know about that.
Yeah, 1984, it's kind of the opposite. It engaged me so much more than I thought it would based on my memories of it. Mm-hmm. And that was just based on me listening to the audiobook a little bit and finding it very engaging. It is more so for the world building than the actual novel.
I feel like it's more poetic than storytelling, almost. Like, at least the movie. The movie felt very poetic.
Yeah. And I think the movie is just interesting because it was made in the same place in the same time that the book was written. So just as like a cool, nerdy historical time capsule, if you will. I also think it's interesting that a lot of these books, which again, it's so funny that I didn't make an effort to read any of them. Almost all of them seem to be first person, like written in the first person.
I find it's probably easier to tell a dystopian story that way because I think we need to know how people are affected. Otherwise, I think it does just turn into all world building. If you're just telling what's happening.
But I do think a lot is lost in translation than in the movies. Like, as people have said about Handmaid's Tale, seemingly a lot of the depth is lost since we don't get the narration. We don't get her internal monologue and her internal perspective. So I do feel like that's, again, a reason to go and actually enjoy these as books.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like these are narratives and ideas that are very much at their best when they're expressed just through writing versus, like, you could do a really good adaptation, but I do feel like yeah, it's probably at its best when you enjoy it in its book form. So read books. That's mostly for me. I don't read. I should. I will probably try to read Handmaid's Tale, if not soon, before I die. So that's my goal.
Soon before I die.
Exactly. I mean, I owe it to Margaret Atwood. I took a picture with her and lied and said I was a big fan. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I know. I knew who she was. I hadn't read anything, and the people that I was with had, and they were like, I need a picture with her. I thought, I do too. And then the guy who went before me, he was like, he literally kneeled in front of her and said, I need to, then he knelt. I just need to tell you how much I admire you and admire your work. Would you do me the honor of taking a photo with me? And she was like, yes, of course. And then I had to follow that up. And I was like, can I have a picture too? And he said, yes. Selfie. And then that's my meeting Margaret Atwood story. So also, I love that I'm wearing a Disney shirt in that photo too, if you saw it and noticed.
Uh-huh.
It's very on brand. Like, of course, it's Margaret Atwood, Canadian legend, and then like early 20s Matt in his Disney Cruise t-shirt. As it should be. As it should be. All right. Anyway, go Canada. Go Margaret Atwood. Go read The Handmaid's Tale, everyone, and maybe those other books too. But Handmaid's Tale was probably my favorite out of the four of these.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Ooh, quickly, let's rank them from least favorite to favorite.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just gonna put Fahrenheit at the bottom since since I didn't do that one. 1984 is probably after that. And Handmaid's Tale I liked, and I would say obviously A Clockwork Orange is my favorite. It's one of my favorite movies in general.
Fair. Yeah, Clockwork Orange. Ooh. I'm so conflicted. Handmaid's Tale is definitely my number one.
Okay.
What would be my number? I almost feel like 1984 would be my number two.
Uh-huh.
So I find it the most engaging in theory after Handmaid's Tale. Clockwork Orange was something that I feel like I'm happy I finally have seen it. I still don't totally get it or the appeal. For me, it's kind of like Jaws. There's so many people who love Jaws and love sharks, and I just don't get it having seen Jaws. I'm like, it's fine. Why does everyone love this? That's kind of where I am with Clockwork Orange. I understand that it's a thing a lot of people love. It just didn't know. But also, but I do love Ray Bradbury. I don't know. I think Clockwork and Fahrenheit are tied for me for third place. That's
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
Makes sense.
Yeah, there it is. All right. All right. Well, we've had a lot of false endings. There's just so much to discuss, but there'll be more to discuss when we get to Superman time. But Jeanette, it's that time. Tell everyone who you are, what you do, and where they can find you.
Okay. So you can find me at TinkerJ787 on Instagram. You can also find me at We Like Theme Parks on Instagram, and on this coming Thursday, not this coming Thursday, next Thursday, we should have an episode that should be me spilling my guts about my Epic Universe trip to Universal.
Oh, I cannot wait.
That'll be fun. Check it out.
Check it out. And it's my turn. There we go. Yeah, and this is my channel. So if you're watching, thank you for watching. And I have not seen the comments. Yes, this was live. Woo! Yeah, welcome. Please subscribe if you haven't. Watch the channel. We're starting Superman month next month, or not next, well, technically, yeah, next month, but also next week. And then more theater reviews, because those are easy to do and they're entertaining because it means I get to see theater. And hopefully I'll do a long form video soon about the history and evolution of Dorothy, because I've been writing that for months, and one day you'll all get to see it. That day's not today though. For now, go read a book. We're done. Thanks everyone. See you next time. How do I end this?